Dear netizens, regarding the Russia-Ukraine war, you've seen Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and Wang constantly saying that Ukraine can't win and should surrender. This perspective completely ignores the situation on the Russian side. Today, I first referenced an analysis from the Institute for the Study of War to understand the actual situation in Russia. Then, I also conducted my own research to see how Russia's recent export situation is, because they heavily rely on exports to purchase supplies. This is necessary to sustain the country, as there are many things they can't do on their own, especially in supporting their military operations. The Institute for the Study of War released a report on when Russia might be able to annex the entire Ukraine, projecting to early 2025. Currently, the Russian military has occupied 20% of Ukraine, and at the current pace of advancement, it would take another 83 years to capture the remaining 80% of Ukraine. By 2022, from November 2024 to January 2025, the Russian military's advancement before 2024 was progressing at 27.9 square miles per day. To give you an idea, Hong Kong is 1,000 square kilometers, and if they were to attack Hong Kong, it would take 50 days. Now, it's dropped to 16.1 square kilometers. Attacking Hong Kong takes 50 days. It would take 66 days, even in the lowest areas of Hong Kong. It would require 66 people. The offensive is slowing down, and the Russian military occasionally advances on small territories, suffering extremely heavy casualties. It was reclaimed at the cost of extremely high casualties. The Ukrainian army estimates that in 8 years, the Russian military has suffered 870,000 casualties. This is the number of casualties, with 250,000 deaths. Let's look at the independent Russian media, which, based on inheritance registration numbers, confirms that 160,000 to 165,000 Russian soldiers have died. This is not fabricated. This is certainly an underestimation, so over 200,000 deaths and nearly 100,000 severely injured. These people cannot return to the battlefield, which is very serious. In fact, those who are injured are in a worse condition than those who died, as some of them have lost limbs. You still have to take care of them, which is more serious than death. Doctors are needed to care for them, so it's said that on the battlefield, injuring people is preferable to killing them. Create some wounded soldiers to take care of them. The equipment losses are staggering. In 3 years, the Russian military has lost 10,000 tanks, 21,000 armored vehicles, and 23,300 artillery pieces. These statistics are confirmed with photos. How many tanks does the Russian military have in total? Between 15,000 to 16,000 and 10,000 are gone. Moreover, almost all of the most advanced tanks have been destroyed. The replacement process is undoubtedly very slow, with many being made from dismantled old tanks from the Soviet era. The production capacity of Russia's defense industry is limited. Just think about it. The Su-57 doesn't dare to go to the front lines because only a few have been made, and the most advanced tanks also don't dare to go to the front lines because they can't be replaced. The reserves from the Soviet era are being heavily depleted, and there's no way to endlessly replenish the frontline forces. So what's happening now is that they are using large sums of money to hire those who want to make money, and criminals to go to the front lines. The more they go out, the more money it costs. Local governments are forced because Putin has given them a quota to meet. It's said that the latest signing bonus is over $30,000, which those people use to risk their lives. The current strategy of the Russian military seems to tacitly allow the war to continue indefinitely. They won't launch a major offensive. Instead, they'll fight you one by one. It's as if they can keep fighting indefinitely. The Kremlin has not abandoned its original military objectives, but they are currently unable to achieve a decisive victory. That is, the opponent is tightly fortified. Currently, their most effective tactic is using glide missiles to bomb your defensive positions, allowing them to advance. I'll tell you, if the Ukrainian forces gain air superiority, they will never be able to advance. They rely on GPS-guided glide bombs to break through your defenses. The evolution of the front line has turned into a war of attrition, consuming resources. This strategy has stalled the Russian forces' progress, causing them significant losses. And they cannot completely defeat Ukraine. Everyone sees the grinding. It is estimated now that Ukraine's casualty numbers are about 30% to 40% of Russia's due to Russia's offensive and their use of human shield-style attacks. Russia's casualties are much more severe, but Ukraine's population is smaller than Russia's. So naturally, the question is when the casualty ratio in terms of population and resources will become problematic for Russia, because behind Ukraine, there is the massive production capacity of the EU and the United States, which Russia ultimately cannot match, because China is also unable to assist Russia with arms production. Only provides some civilian facilities, which North Korea helps with, but you have to consider manpower, because if Europe sends troops in, Russia will collapse, as their entire calculation is based on manpower consumption. Grind down Ukraine, the material consumption is unavoidable. The military equipment will grind down Ukraine. For Ukraine to win, a Ukrainian soldier must die. At the moment when 5 Russian soldiers die, Ukraine hopes to win, or Europe throws its manpower into Ukraine, and Russia's will immediately collapses. What does a prolonged war bring to the Russian economy? It is a heavy burden. The Putin government has thrown a lot of money into it, with government spending skyrocketing while revenue can't keep up. Since the war began, the defense budget has reached 133%, accounting for 30% of the total budget. How much money is that? Some people ask why Ukraine spends so much money and still can't win. It's because Russia spends even more. Ukraine has spent about $300 billion. Ukraine has used already over $100 billion to support government expenditures. The actual amount used on the front lines is between $100 to $200 billion. Russia has spent $400 billion over these 3 years. Such high military expenditures are unsustainable. The deficit is so large that it cannot be maintained, resulting in a decrease in the standard of living for the people. The war has led to severe inflation in Russia, a labor shortage, and the use of the country's sovereign fund reserves to compensate. By the end of 2024, Russia's working population will be short by 1.5 million people. Of course, some have died due to the pandemic, and because of the war, there have been casualties among skilled soldiers, and some eligible individuals have left. Russia's industries, the defense industry, and all sectors are supplying to the defense industry. The defense industry is struggling to obtain enough equipment and ammunition for the front lines. In the medium term, there is no way to replenish enough armored vehicles and artillery ammunition. I tell everyone, if you think Ukraine is desperate, you should see how desperate Russia is. Russia is actually using human labor for transport in the eastern Ukrainian plains, something not seen since the First World War. They no longer have vehicles. They have twice used motorcycles for transport, then bicycles, and now human labor, which shows just how desperate they are. To make up for the shortage of military supplies, they are so short on manpower that they have to use North Korean soldiers. This shows that they have already entered wartime mode, with all industries serving the war effort. However, the Western sanctions on those high-tech components and equipment need to be replaced by China, which is somewhat different. As a result, Russia has bought millions of artillery shells from North Korea and rockets, while Iran is helping them make drones and ballistic missiles. By the end of 2024, 60% of the artillery used by Russia will come from North Korea. Without North Korea, they would be finished because China cannot supply shells, and they fire tens of thousands of shells daily on the battlefield. They would be done in a month. The Institute for the Study of War estimates that if the war losses continue, in at most 12 to 18 months, they will no longer be able to equip their troops. The economic difficulties are dragging Russia down, and the burden on people's livelihoods brought by the war is further intensifying. In other words, Russia's economic and resource systems are under the pressure of operating beyond their capacity. He often looks at it. It's ancient, although the war has dragged on for a long time, and the economy is terrible. Many people in Russia still support continuing the fight until complete victory. In February 2025, this February, an independent poll showed that 46% of people believe that they oppose withdrawing troops before achieving the war's objectives, so he cannot withdraw the troops. The war for Russia. The negative impact on Russian society is becoming increasingly severe. Now, 54% of people say that the war has already affected their lives, more than half, and 36% say their economic situation is deteriorating. It's getting more serious. As soon as people finish work, I see Russians going to set up street stalls, taking anything valuable from home to sell, essentially exchanging these products. A death cross is about to occur, with the proportion of people supporting the government's prioritization of military spending dropping from 43% to 36%. Those prioritizing social and livelihood issues have increased from 38% to 48%. Originally, it was 43 to 38. With military prioritization, now it's 48 to 36, favoring livelihood prioritization. This is the death cross. To address the shortage of troops, 300,000 are being mobilized annually starting in 2022. They are recruiting volunteer soldiers from the reserves and hiring mercenaries. I'm looking for mercenaries and prisoners around me, but this has led to eligible men leaving and increased international tension. In the future, a large-scale draft will face backlash, as they are currently offering a signing bonus of $35,000 to become soldiers. Some earn $200K plus high. Some are very poor, so they take a chance. Russia wants to break its isolation, and all its hopes are pinned on Donald Trump. They are trying to win over non-Western powers that can help them, particularly those that can supply them with arms. These are Iran and North Korea, who are not afraid of Western sanctions. China and India continue to trade with them, buying goods from them. China also provides them with a lot of materials. For example, cars are bought from China. However, Iran and North Korea supply Russia with military materials. This gives them some breathing room. International sanctions have frozen a large amount of Russia's foreign exchange reserves, and the ruble has plummeted. What is the exchange rate now? The ruble was around 50-something, and now it's approximately 114 to $1. Before the war started, it was 50-something rubles, and in Crimea, it went up to 200 rubles. This is the official exchange rate. The aid from the US and Europe to Ukraine has restrained Russia, along with the US and its European allies. They continue to provide weapons and intelligence, which has increased the resistance power of the Ukrainian military, continuously depleting Russia's active forces. So, this is a very worthwhile endeavor. You don't lose lives, just spend a bit of money. 30 to 40 billion US dollars. How much is 30 to 40 billion US dollars? It's 0.5% of the US annual budget. Those who say the US is going bankrupt, in reality, It only takes 0.5% to hold back a major enemy, depleting their strength. Timely military aid from the West is crucial to whether Ukraine can withstand the Russian offensive. This is of great importance and is key to forcing Putin to eventually abandon his ambitions of conquest. Putin knows that if the West is united, it is certainly disadvantageous for him. I've said it before, it's laughable to claim that the free world can't drag Russia down. You have the United States, the European Union, the Five Eyes excluding the US, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. Just these regions, Northern Europe, comprise the world economy. They make up over 50% of the global economy, while Russia now only accounts for 1.8%, which is 30 times less. Your population is nearly 1 billion people, which is 8 times that of Russia. Russia is now trying to wear down the patience of the West. They keep saying they are prepared for a long-term battle, believing that time is on Russia's side because as long as they maintain authoritarian control without dissent at home, they think they can outlast you. This is the weakness of democratic countries. When the West becomes weary of war, internal divisions appear in the United States, and then they can take advantage. As soon as the United States withdraws, they feel they've won. As long as the US pulls out, they win. For example, after the US government changes in 2025, if their attitude towards Ukraine shifts, it would be a case in point. Donald Trump pressured Ukraine to negotiate. There was a period when military aid and intelligence were halted. This perfectly aligns with what Russia hopes for. They spare no effort to create conflicts between the United States, Europe, and Ukraine. That's why they are now catering to Donald Trump, outwardly expressing support for peace, but in reality, they do not agree. As long as the European allies continue to generally maintain their support for Ukraine and sanctions against Russia, and Ukraine does not make concessions on territorial sovereignty. While Russia insists on achieving its goals, if it completely fails to achieve its objectives, it becomes a very difficult situation. As long as the West continues to support Ukraine without backing down, it will be unable to defeat Ukraine even after many years, becoming mired in a quagmire. And it is paying a high price. The biggest issue now is the US withdrawal, but European countries have decided to fill the US's position without costing the US a cent. And they can win in the future. The biggest fear is that, for now, what is most needed is US intelligence. It is said that they have sent 5 to 10 new satellites to replace the Starlink satellites, if necessary. Let's take a look at Russia's economic situation. I'll provide you with some statistics. Russia's total exports in 2021 were $548.8 billion US, and in 2022, it was over $600 billion. Why is that? Because oil prices skyrocketed. In 2023, it was over $460 billion, and in 2024, lower. This year, it's lower, with oil at $70 a barrel. Moreover, the quality of the oil he exports is better, roughly $350 billion. He needs to use this $350 billion to support the war and buy essential goods. Crude oil export volume, 225 million. Approximately, the value once soared, but now it's come down. Oil product exports have dropped, especially in 2024 and 2025, as many refineries were bombed by Ukraine. Crude oil exports have basically fallen to zero, and oil product exports have dropped to zero. He has already banned exports. Managing natural gas, it's gone. By this year, 2025, the last export. Managing natural gas through Sukajan, liquefied natural gas is very cheap, very little. Where is the crude oil being sold? Originally, 48% was sold to Europe. Now 15% is sold to China and India, making up 85%. China accounts for 40%, plus 10%, India adds 18%, and Turkey has a slight increase. His total income is is approximately how much per day? In the second half of 2024, looking at the latest situation, it's over 600 million per day, which is over 100 billion. In 2025, it's 680 million, then 640 million, showing a slight decrease. Compared to before the sanctions, it has significantly decreased. Future prospects must rely on Asian demand. This is the situation in Russia. This is essentially an internal competition, but the most serious issue for democratic countries, especially when the war is not on their own soil, is that they will develop a war weariness. So I say that democratic countries are basically cowards, and they are stingy and miserly.